Everyone thought my wedding would be ordinary, but my parents had a plan, one that would put my sister in the spotlight before me. They didn't know we were ready. What happened next? Let's just say they never saw it coming. When I first moved into that apartment 3 years ago, I remember standing in the doorway, clutching the keys and thinking, this will do. It wasn't fancy, not even close, but it was mine. After years of living under my parents' roof, dealing with their control, their manipulation, their endless criticism, I just wanted somewhere I could breathe. I didn't have much. A secondhand couch, a wobbly table, a few boxes of dishes. But it was enough to make it feel like a home. In the first few weeks, I started to settle into a rhythm. I'd wake up early, drink my coffee on the tiny balcony, and feel the morning sun on my face. It was peaceful. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had control over something. I could decorate how I wanted, eat when I wanted, sleep when I wanted. It was quiet. It was freedom. But freedom has a way of feeling strange when you've never had it before. The silence was heavy sometimes. I'd find myself scrolling through my phone, staring at my family's group chat, debating whether to send a message. My mom would occasionally text me, always with the same tone, fake sweet, but laced with guilt. "We miss you, honey. Don't you want to come home for dinner?" Or, "Your sister's been asking about you." Every time I replied, it turned into the same thing, a subtle reminder that I was the difficult one, the ungrateful one, the problem child. So I stopped replying altogether. Months passed and my life started to feel normal. I made new friends at work, spent weekends at cafes, and sometimes even took myself to the movies. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Then one day I met him, Mark. Mark wasn't like anyone I'd ever dated before. He was calm, grounded, patient. He listened when I talked. Really listened. Like what I said mattered. We met at a bookstore, both reaching for the same novel. We laughed, made small talk, and ended up having coffee that same afternoon. It felt easy with him, natural. As weeks turned into months, Mark became my safe place. He'd visit my apartment after work, bring groceries, cook dinner while I told him stories about my family, about how I'd left, about the constant pressure growing up. He never judged, just nodded quietly, sometimes holding my hand when my voice started to shake. I told him about my mother, how she always compared me to my younger sister, Emma. Emma was the golden child, the perfect daughter. Straight A's, pretty, polite, always saying the right thing. My parents adored her. Me? I was the disappointment, the one who never measured up. When Mark and I got serious, he gently suggested I try reconnecting with them. He said maybe time had softened things. Maybe they missed me. I wanted to believe that. I really did. So after nearly 2 years of silence, I agreed to visit them for dinner. I remember the drive there, the way my hands shook on the steering wheel. Their house looked exactly the same. The garden was trimmed perfectly, the windows spotless, the air thick with that same fake warmth I remembered. My mother opened the door before I could even knock. Her smile was practiced, almost too bright. "Sweetheart, you look healthy," she said. Not pretty, not happy, healthy. That was her way of saying I'd gained weight. Inside, my father gave me a quick nod, and Emma, of course, looked perfect. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect dress. She hugged me like she was greeting a distant cousin, not her sister. We sat at the table, and for the first few minutes, it was almost civil, until my mother started asking questions. "So how's your little apartment? Still in that area?" I smiled tightly and nodded. "Yes, still there." "And what about work? Are you still doing that office job? It's not very stable, is it?" Mark squeezed my hand under the table. I could tell he was biting his tongue. I smiled and said, "It's going fine." Then she turned to Emma and said, "You know, your sister's always been independent. She likes doing things the hard way." The way she said it made my stomach twist. I forced a smile and focused on my food. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. After dinner, Mark and I left quickly. In the car, he said, "You don't have to go back if it hurts you." But deep down, part of me still wanted their approval. I wanted them to see that I was okay, that I had built something on my own. Over the next few months, my mother started calling more. Sometimes she was polite, sometimes passive-aggressive. She'd ask about Mark, about whether he had a real job, about whether we planned to get married. I tried to keep the peace. I wanted to believe she was changing. When Mark finally proposed, I was over the moon. It was a quiet moment, just the two of us in our apartment, the city lights glowing outside. He slipped the ring on my finger and said, "I want you and only you." I cried. It felt like everything I'd been waiting for. Of course, my mother found out almost immediately. I don't even remember telling her. I think Emma mentioned it. The next day, my mother called, pretending to be thrilled. "Oh, sweetheart, we're so happy for you. You must let us help with the wedding." At first, I thought she meant it. I thought maybe this was her way of reconnecting. But soon the old patterns returned. She started criticizing every idea I had. The venue was too small, the colors were too dull, the food was too cheap. And of course, Emma had opinions about everything. "I think you should let me handle your makeup," she said one afternoon. "You don't really know how to do bridal looks." I just nodded, too tired to argue. Then one evening, Mark came home looking puzzled. He said, "Your mom and sister called me today." My heart sank. "Why?" "They said they want to talk about something important, privately." The next day, he went to see them. When he came back, he looked both amused and angry. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "They told me they'll only pay for the wedding if Emma gets to walk down the aisle first." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. "First? What do you mean?" "They said it's not right for the younger sister to get married after the older one, so they want Emma to walk first, in a white dress, like it's her wedding too." For a moment I thought he was joking. Then I saw the look on his face. He wasn't. I felt sick. I could almost hear my mother's voice in my head, saying how tradition mattered more than feelings. It wasn't about tradition, though. It was about control. They couldn't stand the idea of me having a day that wasn't about them, or Emma. I told Mark I didn't want their money, that we'd do the wedding ourselves. But he stopped me. He said, "No, let them pay, let them think they're in charge. We'll give them exactly what they want, until it's too late to take it back." That was the night everything changed. He started visiting them alone, pretending to be the easygoing future son-in-law. He agreed with everything they said, acted like I was just being difficult. He told them that I didn't like conflict, and that if they surprised me, I wouldn't dare make a scene. They believed every word. And just like that, the plan was set. Over the next few months, the entire wedding planning became a carefully orchestrated game. Mark and I had countless late-night strategy sessions in our tiny apartment, plotting how to get everything we wanted without my parents realizing it. They thought they were controlling the budget and the details, but in reality, we were letting them pay for the most extravagant options, all while thinking we were the ones in control. It was the ultimate irony. We were turning their greed and obsession with Emma into our advantage. Whenever my parents wanted to weigh in on something, Mark would play the part perfectly. He'd listen politely, nod thoughtfully, and then say things like, "I see your point, but I think she might really prefer..." He'd mention me in ways that made it sound like I was the difficult one, the one needing guidance. Well, they were the wise advisors, and they bought it, hook, line, and sinker. Flowers, for example, became a battlefield. I had fallen in love with soft pastels, a mixture of peonies, roses, and baby's breath. My mother insisted on loud, gaudy arrangements that matched the grandeur of Emma's personality, she said. I pretended to acquiesce. I sent her a picture of the tacky flowers, acting upset while Mark secretly confirmed with the florist to upgrade everything to the most expensive arrangement, in exactly the style I wanted. By the time my parents saw the final invoice, they were bragging to everyone about how generous they had been, completely unaware that they'd been tricked into funding my dream flowers. The catering was another masterpiece of deception. My parents insisted on a low-cost menu that they thought would keep Mark and me under their thumb. Mark pretended to reluctantly agree, sighing dramatically, saying, "I suppose we'll go with that for now." Meanwhile, he arranged tastings at the top caterers in town, tested the most expensive options, and quietly told the vendors to prepare the meals we actually wanted. My parents' text messages brimmed with delight at their perceived influence, praising themselves for choosing such a thoughtful menu. In reality, it was all Mark's doing, all mine. And then there was the dress. My parents had apparently found the perfect bridal gown, which I immediately recognized as hideous. It was bulky, outdated, and completely the opposite of my style. They sent me a photo with the caption, "We found something Emma would absolutely adore. It's so elegant." My heart sank. I knew this was their way of asserting control, a test of whether I would bend to their will. I replied politely, "Thank you for thinking of me, but I don't feel comfortable in that dress. I think I want something different." They pressed. As expected, but Mark swooped in, feigning indecision and saying, "I'll see what I can do. Maybe we can find a compromise." My parents left the conversation satisfied, believing they had reasoned him into a middle ground. In reality, Mark was just buying time for us to secure my actual gown, a dress I had picked months earlier in secret, one that perfectly reflected me. Communication was key to keeping our ruse intact. My parents and sister had learned from years of my supposedly controlling behavior that I monitored Mark's every move, so nothing could be left in writing. Every discussion about Emma walking down the aisle first, every debate about the venue, the flowers, the photographer, it had to happen verbally, face to face. Mark became an expert at navigating their manipulations, always ensuring that when I received updates, they were filtered just enough to preserve the illusion. Emma, of course, was blissfully unaware of the double game we were playing. She assumed she was the star of the show, the golden girl whose wish would be fulfilled at every turn, whenever she tried to involve me in her schemes. I played along with a carefully measured dose of feigned compliance. I nodded, agreed, smiled. All the while, I knew Mark had already taken care of the real arrangements. The day of the wedding finally approached, and tension mixed with anticipation. The plan was simple yet daring. Let my parents and Emma believe they were orchestrating a ceremony that centered on her walking down the aisle first, but in reality, we had hired security to ensure she never reached the venue. It was audacious, yes, but after years of emotional manipulation and favoritism, I felt this was not only justified but necessary. On the morning of the wedding, Mark and I went over the final details one last time. He reminded me of the security team, of the signals we'd agreed upon, of the friend who would help guide me at the right moment. We reviewed everything as if it were a military operation. There was a thrill in the meticulousness, a shared delight in turning our parents' obsession into a perfect storm of ironic justice. Meanwhile, my parents were ecstatic. They had spent weeks preparing Emma, buying her a white gown for the grand occasion. Emma was radiant, smug in her assumed victory. My parents were basking in the idea that they had orchestrated a perfect tribute to their favorite daughter, and yet they had no idea that the entire plan was about to collapse spectacularly. When my parents and Emma arrived at the venue, they were greeted by the security team we had hired. A tall man with a clipboard and a serious expression blocked their path. "I'm sorry," he said firmly, "but this is the wrong venue. The bride is already here." My parents were shocked. "What do you mean? This is the correct venue. We reserved it." "I'm afraid there's been a mix-up," the security guard replied. "Please wait here until this can be resolved." Emma's face turned pale, her smug smile faltering. She looked to my parents for help, but they were flustered. unsure how to respond. Every demand they made was met with polite but firm resistance. The security guard, well briefed by Mark, refused to budge. He was professional, neutral, and immovable, exactly as we had planned. Inside, Mark positioned me at the entrance. I was calm, composed, ready. The bridal song began, and all eyes turned as I made my entrance. My heart pounded with exhilaration. My parents' faces were a mix of shock, confusion, and fury. Emma, standing just behind them, realized immediately that she would not be walking down the aisle. She had been outmaneuvered at every step. Guests whispered, murmured, and glanced around, trying to figure out the chaos unfolding. I kept my gaze forward, walking slowly and deliberately, savoring the moment. Every step was a small victory. Every eye that turned to watch me was a reminder that this day, finally, was about me. As I reached Mark, I saw him smiling, a quiet, victorious grin. We exchanged a glance, a shared acknowledgement of the months of planning and deception that had brought us to this moment. It was perfect, not just because of the elegance of the ceremony, but because of the poetic justice served to the people who had tried to control my life for so long. The ceremony proceeded flawlessly. The confusion outside continued for a while, with my parents and Emma attempting to salvage dignity. But it was too late. The narrative had already shifted. Guests were murmuring about the audacity. After the ceremony, the reception began. Mark and I were surrounded by friends and family who were fully aware of the situation. Laughter, toasts, and joy filled the air. My parents attempted to participate, but the tension was palpable. They were no longer in control. They were simply observers to a celebration that belonged entirely to us. Emma, humiliated and defeated, retreated to the corner, clutching her dress, realizing that her carefully constructed plans had failed spectacularly. My parents' attempts to console her only highlighted their own misjudgment. They had assumed control, and yet, in a cruel twist of irony, they had funded the celebration that entirely excluded Emma's ambitions. As the evening wound down, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Years of manipulation, favoritism, and emotional cruelty had culminated in this moment of triumph. It wasn't about vengeance for the sake of anger. It was about reclaiming my own agency, finally asserting my right to a day that was mine and mine alone. Mark and I slipped away for a quiet moment, holding hands, reflecting on the chaos we had orchestrated. "We did it," I whispered, still in disbelief. "Yes," he said, smiling, "and no one could have done it better." In that instant, I realized that this was more than a wedding. It was a declaration that I would no longer be sidelined, overlooked, or manipulated, that I had the power to shape my life, to assert my choices, and to enjoy the fruits of my own hard work and planning. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly free. After the ceremony, the reception was a delicate balance of celebration and subtle chaos. Mark and I were surrounded by close friends and family who had been in on our little plan. Their faces glowed with excitement, some trying to stifle laughter at the unfolding drama outside the main hall. My parents and Emma were technically present, but the air around them was thick with tension. They tried to smile, tried to mingle, but every whispered comment, every sideways glance from the guests reminded them that the game was over, and they had lost. Emma's humiliation was palpable. The security had done their job perfectly, ensuring she never entered the venue. Guests who had seen her and my parents, struggling outside, were buzzing with curiosity, but none dared interfere. My mother, red-faced and flustered, attempted to whisper explanations to neighbors and distant relatives, but the absurdity of her story was evident. My father, usually so commanding and proud, looked helpless, his face a shade of purple that shifted to white with every failed attempt to assert authority. The two of them had underestimated the precision of our plan. Meanwhile, Mark and I floated through the reception like a dream, basking in the triumph of every small detail falling into place. The flowers, the catering, the dress, all had turned out exactly as we wanted. and every penny had been paid for by my parents, who had believed they were doing Emma a favor. Every compliment we received from guests felt like a quiet celebration of the justice we had orchestrated. The photographer captured the moments beautifully, unaware of the chaos outside. Every smile, every toast, every dance was a testament not just to our marriage, but to months of careful planning and quiet vengeance. I noticed the relief in Mark's eyes as he guided me across the dance floor, whispering little jokes about how my parents and sister were undoubtedly losing their minds outside. I laughed, a genuine, uninhibited laugh I hadn't felt in years. Later, I slipped away to check in on the situation outside. Through a discreet window, I could see Emma sitting on the curb, screaming and crying while my parents frantically tried to console her. Security had made it clear that unless they had a legitimate invitation, no one would be allowed inside. My heart swelled with satisfaction. After years of favoritism and emotional cruelty, Emma and my parents had finally learned what it felt like to be powerless. Even when my parents tried to call me afterward, Mark intercepted the calls. We had meticulously documented every interaction, screenshots, call logs, messages, creating an airtight record of their behavior. Mark even sent proof to family members, carefully curating it so they could see the truth without risking any public backlash. Our extended family, long aware of the favoritism and manipulation, quietly supported us, giving nods of approval when they realized how perfectly the plan had worked. As the evening progressed, the party settled into a rhythm of celebration. Guests danced, laughed, and toasted to the new couple. Emma's absence from the festivities inside became the unspoken topic of conversation, a reminder of how audacious her plan had been and how completely it had failed. My parents attempted to salvage their dignity, but it was futile. Every step they took seemed to highlight their loss of control. At one point, a friend in on the plan came up to me and whispered with a grin, "Your sister is throwing a fit outside, and your parents are terrified." "This is priceless," I laughed softly, feeling a mix of relief, joy, and vindication. It wasn't malicious, revenge. It was simply the culmination of years of being treated unfairly, finally reclaiming the narrative that had always been stolen from me. Mark and I shared a quiet moment away from the crowd, watching the sunset from a balcony overlooking the venue. The chaos inside and outside seemed distant, almost surreal. "I can't believe we pulled this off," I said, leaning into him. He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "You've always deserved this. All those years, all the crap your parents and sister put you through. You finally get to enjoy what's yours." It struck me then how far we had come. The little girl who had once been ignored, dismissed, and scapegoated now stood fully in her power. The years of manipulation, favoritism, and cruelty had forged resilience and cleverness. I realized that the wedding, beyond the beautiful flowers, music, and laughter, was also a testament to my journey, a public declaration that I was no longer a bystander in my own life. As night fell, the reception reached its crescendo. Guests were lively, sharing stories, laughing, and enjoying every aspect of the celebration. The music soared, and for the first time I felt an unbroken sense of joy. Mark and I danced under the soft glow of fairy lights, surrounded by those who truly cared, feeling like the world had finally tilted in our favor. When the last dance ended, we retreated to our honeymoon suite, exhausted but elated. The day had been everything we had dreamed of, joyous, elegant, and above all ours. We recounted every moment, laughing at the elaborate lengths we had gone to outwit my parents and Emma, marveling at the precision with which everything had unfolded. Even in the quiet of the night, we were still buzzing with adrenaline. We reflected on the months of planning, the intricate lies, the careful orchestration of every detail, and the unwavering teamwork that had made the entire plan possible. It wasn't just about tricking my family. It was about proving to ourselves that we could face challenges together, clever, united, and victorious. Days later, we returned from our honeymoon to find the fallout ongoing. Emma and my parents had tried contacting me multiple times, leaving frantic messages that were as incoherent as they were desperate. Mark intercepted everything, keeping careful records. Screenshots of their texts, recordings of their calls, and detailed notes ensured we had complete documentation of their attempts to harass us. Emma's messages were especially entertaining. She raged about how Mark had fooled them, how she had been denied her moment of glory, and how she blamed me entirely. I smiled, reading her frantic attempts to rewrite history, knowing full well that our plan had worked perfectly. Mark even joked about printing her messages to hang on the wall as a reminder of poetic justice. Over the following weeks, the family dynamic shifted dramatically. Our extended family, long aware of my parents' favoritism, quietly reinforced boundaries. Invitations were extended selectively, conversations were carefully moderated, and for the first time, Emma and my parents' attempts to manipulate me were met with polite but firm resistance. The shift was subtle but profound. My parents had lost the illusion of control, and Emma had learned that her schemes would no longer dictate my life. Looking back, I realized the wedding was more than a celebration of marriage. It was a declaration of autonomy, a statement that I was finally in control of my own story. Years of manipulation and favoritism had forged a bond between Mark and me that was unbreakable, built on trust, strategy, and shared humor. We had not just married each other. We had reclaimed a part of my life that had been stolen from me. Even now, long after the wedding, I feel the empowerment of that day, the laughter, the clever orchestration, the ultimate triumph over Emma and my parents. It all remains vivid. The wedding was more than a ceremony. It was a masterclass in patience, planning, and subtle revenge, executed with precision and grace. Mark and I often reminisce about the day, laughing at the absurdity and brilliance of our strategy. We've shared the story with close friends and family, always with a sense of pride and delight. The way everything unfolded, the flowers, the dress, the catering, the security, the timing was flawless. And for the first time, I felt truly seen, respected, and celebrated for exactly who I was, without favoritism, without manipulation, without compromise. It wasn't just a wedding, it was a victory. If you've ever been treated unfairly by family, you'll want to hear this story. My parents always favored my sister, and when they tried to make her the center of my wedding, we turned the tables in a way they'll never forget. Watch till the end, and don't forget to like and follow for more amazing stories.